So we would love to start you off again at ReZume Arts October 14th with Erin Lynn Marsh and Carol Ann Russell. Just to let you know, this event is hosted by Region 2 Arts Council. My name is Catherine. I work as a program assistant. And then Holly is also here. She will be fielding questions from the Facebook live stream. And then Laura, our executive director, is actually helping us with the Facebook Live. So we're gonna give a chance for each poet to talk a little bit about themselves and then go into some nice conversations and poetry readings. So we hope you enjoy this segment. Erin, we'd love to just start off with you, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about you, your work, what you're up to lately.
Sure. My name is Erin Lynn Marsh, and I published my very first book of poetry last year, and it's called Disability Isn't Sexy. And I write a lot about being in a body that is considered to be other by our society, just to give people the experience of being in that body, but also just that people who are disabled are very, very normal. We have all the same desires and wishes and wants that everybody else has. So I write a lot about that. Currently, I'm working on a book of love poems, but they're written from the perspective of someone who is a little bit obsessive and a little bit has some mental illness stuff going on. Because I think when anybody falls in love, there's a little bit of madness that goes on in the brain. So I wanted to write about that. So
that's great. I'm excited and I'm curious, how did you get started with your poetry?
I started writing poetry when I was seriously when I was in college. The poet Lucille Clifton came and visited our college and made me realize that you could do that as something you could do for a living, like you could actually be an actual poet. So that really kind of is what got me started.
Nice. And how long have you been doing this, Erin?
Well, I'm 46 and I've been writing since I was 20-ish, so 26 years.
Wow. Yeah. That's beautiful. And I know that you also, from what I remember, you also mentioned something about starting a blog page recently.
Yeah. Yes, on my website, which is erinlynnmarsh.com, I have a blog, and it's going to be about creativity, especially living in a smaller community, about ways to keep your creativity fresh and keep poetry or other art on your mind, and inspire you. And my first blog post is about poetry podcasts, which I love to listen to those podcasts. So
nice.
They're very fun.
I'm subscribing to your blog. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I'm curious too, one of the things we know from Region 2 is that you were in New Mexico last year?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Would you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was about?
The woman who published my collection of poems, she is based out of New Mexico. And so she very graciously invited me to come down, and I did 4 readings, and just spent time down there, getting to know some different artists down there, talking about poetry. It was very fun to get out of, especially it was in the fall, so it was kind of nice just to be somewhere warm. And
yeah, that's always a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's great. And I'm curious also, just as far as your book, are there any places where people can find your book available at the moment?
I know that they used to have some copies at the Wild Hare. Not sure if they still do, but you can also order them through me. And also on Amazon. So
Yeah, and I remember, so an extra bonus of ordering them directly with you is that you get signed copies, right?
Right, I can sign a copy for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
So, you know, we'd love to learn a little bit about Carol Ann now, and maybe we can learn. And I see that you have a cat too, Erin. My
Yes.
cat every once in a while just kind of walks through my screen as well. So
I also have a cat, and he is sleeping right now.
that's awesome.
Across from me on the chair with his nose tucked under his tail. I noticed your cat immediately, Erin. Your cat has an interesting name. I remember. What's your cat's name?
Her name is Isola.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
an interesting name. Was it a grandmother that you named her?
A great aunt.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I love it. I love this eccentric presence in your life. I never forgot you telling me about Isola. You know, it's wonderful. I was just reading that the Claudine series has a lot of cats in it. And I've never read that series, but I think I might start now that I'm not working all the time. So about myself. So I've been writing, I was just adding it up seriously, probably for 45 years, starting an MFA program in 1975 and and I got an MA at the same time. So I took about 4 years to finish it all. And that was my first introduction to working with a group of poets, which I found to be very formative. And I encourage anyone who's listening to find a little circle of people to work with. I know Erin does that. I do that at the Headwater School. They do happen. And there's something marvelous that happens when you work with a collective muse. It's catchy like the measles, like COVID, it's catchy. And it does help you through the dry times, you know. You can learn as much from other people's work as sometimes more than you can from your own. So that was a real stimulant for me. So was having to put together a thesis. Because you had to, it's like taking in the unwanted children. These poems weren't that great, you know. I mean, I published a few of them and even won the Poetry Academy of American Poets Prize at my university with one of them. But the rest of them were like orphans, and they were, you know, they weren't perfect. And yet we had to gather them all in and find a way for them to all get along, you know, in a thesis. So that was a really big deal for me. And then I started teaching, which also teaches you a lot about writing if you have an opportunity. And I noticed, Erin, that I remember you teaching in my class, and you have a great gift for teaching.
Thank you.
You know, real insight into students' poems and very articulate about what they're doing, you know. That's really helpful to the poet as well, don't you think?
Yes, I do.
It's
Definitely.
really interesting. Things that come out of your mouth, you didn't even know they were going to come out, and you go, oh,
Right.
yeah, that's great. Then I actually decided to get a PhD in creative writing, which is rather dangerous, but I was able to do all poetry writing, you know, for my dissertation. Same thing. I brought it so you could see it. I actually came across it. Here it is. It's all mildewed and everything. See?
Oh.
And I had to type it over, you know, twice because I typed it myself and it was wrong. And it's on paper that lives longer than you do, you know, that kind of thing. So it's kind of terrifying. And I called mine a wall of leaping. And the same thing, I had some dreadful stuff in there. Hopefully you won't find it. But it gave me something to stand on. And I gave it that title on purpose because I figured if I don't commit suicide, I have to get off that wall somehow. You know, take a leap to the next thing. And those titles make a difference. They're talismanic. I do believe they carry energy. My first book was called The Red Envelope. And again, I had these poems I began to publish them. Of course, you have to do that before you publish a book, first book, especially, as Erin knows. And then they started to come together. I saw that they were really made of my flesh and blood, if you will. They're very autobiographical. But then I didn't know how to get them all together. And one day I did actually go into a grocery store. I bought groceries, went home, took all the groceries out. In the bottom of this bag, there was a big red envelope. And it was empty. And it was just what I needed. I do believe that sometimes, you know, these images will manifest themselves in a real way for us. Sometimes if we're just open to it, like, you know, dreaming kind of in a way. And I just thought, well, I'll have to name it that. That's the perfect thing. And it did help a lot because it was a container, you know, and it was a vibrant container. And so I always feel there's a connection between, you know, the mystical and the real. So I wanted to just take you on a brief tour. The Feast book, I wrote these poems all during my pregnancy with my second son. And so I was carrying another life inside me. That really disturbs you. Talk about mental illness. Well, pregnant women are almost that, you know, you get all these hormones and everything, and it loosens up lots of things. So I wrote a lot of things I would never write about, like talking about the penis, for example. I would never write that now, you know, but I did. And in this particular book of poems, I also went to, before I ever wrote it, I went to Ragdale Colony for a month, and I had a series of dreams there, very vivid colored dreams. And they were 5 dreams. And I wrote down all the notes, you know, and then I decided to make them into sonnets because I didn't know what to do. And so I made them into sonnets, but they had seeds for future books, is what I'm saying. In fact, this book came out of, this is where that poem came into this book at the very end. And I also worked with the painter, Marcy Wood, who did the cover, and she did the cover based on my dreams. Mm-hmm. So there were images everywhere, you know, and they're very powerful, I think. They lay dormant in you for a long time. And then, and I called the poem Alchemy, which worked. The Tao of Woman, which is a chapbook, this is another thing you can do if you have a dry spell, is to retell an ancient text in a woman's voice. And I was encouraged to do that by Meridel Lesueur when I went to the women's conference down in Mankato State early on in the 90s. And it was really interesting what happened when you take like this idea of pure consciousness, which is a male idea, I do believe. How can you be conscious without your body? I don't know. But and it does change everything that comes through you because you're different. You know, it is still a pure consciousness, but it's tinged with our own, you know, female part that's part of the whole, you know. So that was really interesting to do. And I felt a bit like I was committing, you know, sacrilege by doing that, you know, by taking Lao Tzu's work and seeing what happened in the process. Very interesting things happened because female images come forward and they're very different. With Silver Dollar, it was really an important book. I actually had the real silver dollar that my father gave me, you know, and so that was a talisman that I had anyway. And that really did begin to pull together a book. This book has a lot of unexpressed grief in it. And I know, Erin, I know you understand this because you've talked about this in some way, which is, you know, we have these experiences. It's not like they're personal. They're really almost transpersonal. But a poet or an artist begins to have to work with that stuff. That's part of what we do. We pick it up and we begin to work with it. And so what that did was it opened the door for my own stories to come forward and take their own, you know, poetic journeys, if you will. Because if you write, as you know, when you start writing, the words begin to take a path and you sort of follow that path. And then when you stumble, your imagination picks you up and takes you somewhere else. And, you know, it all seems to come together. And I presented that book with Larry Long, who's a singer. And he and I went to St. Cloud State together. We're the same age. He came to Bemidji and sang songs, and I read that book. And so we were collaborating again in 2 mediums, which I think is very helpful at times because it allows your audience to relax. And, you know, it opens other portals for understanding art, you know. Mm-hmm. Then Without Reservation was kind of politically inspired by feminism and the whole wannabe thing that everybody was being hit with, the multicultural mush thing that we were all accused of if we tried to, you know, bring anything together. And so I really took a rap voice in that, and I just kind of let down my guard. I mean, I just told the literary person to leave the room. I got rid of punctuation. I got rid of being embarrassed, making mistakes, and I just went for it. And there are a few poems that are different. One was written about the Irish, you know, migration. And after seeing a St. Patrick's Day parade in Pittsburgh, when I was there for AWP, I decided to write that one. And then I wrote several for Etheridge Knight, who is a Black poet who was a friend of mine that came to my college where I was teaching in Connecticut and Missouri to read to students. And he really believed in freeing the voice, you know. And so I wrote several poems dedicated to him in that book. It was a very freeing book. I never thought it would be a book, but a publisher wrote and said, send me some stuff, whatever you've got. I just sent him that stuff and he put it into this little chapbook, you know, Without Reservation. So that, and then Gypsy Taxi really exemplifies the importance of travel. And it's always been important to me. So, you know, growing up in the Midwest, get out of here and go somewhere else where you hear a different language, everything's different. Took a long time to process those poems though, and get them out. I mean, I went in 1999 and the book came out in 2005 and it still isn't done. I mean, there's a lot of flaws in it. It was a short book. You know, but it's another way to write. I guess what I'm sharing is all these ways to write are acceptable and they work. You know, and almost you don't know if they're going to work until you give yourself over to them.
Yeah.
So that's where right now I'm in a different place, with looking at my selected, going back through my work. And when I was in Italy just last year on the fellowship, I went through and tried to gather poems from each book that might harmonize with them into a selected manuscript. And that was really difficult. It was difficult to read my own work and to get into that space for, of time and feeling and everything. And then to just kind of think about them all getting along somehow. I still haven't solved it. I'm not happy with it. And I don't think it's there yet. And I don't know if there'll be new poems with it or not. Sometimes, it's a book of its own. It just won't play well with anybody else,
Wow, it's like a family. It's like a family that's also your life.
That's a good way of putting it. And I guess that's where I'd stop right now. I just wanted to share some points of how, on my journey, how it was for me and some of the things that inspired and helped me. So.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And there's so much richness in what you just shared, Carol Ann, because I wonder, Erin, what really resonated for you as a writer, what in your process, what spoke to you from that share?
I really like what you were talking about, Carol Ann, when you're talking about how you have to try different things. You don't know what's going to work until you try it. Because right now I'm in the middle of that project of working on love poems, and I've never really written toward a book before. Like I just wrote, and whatever happened, happened. And if it came to a book, it came to a book. So this is kind of a new experience, and I'm definitely hearing from what you were saying that I need to give myself over to that process.
Definitely.
And try new things.
You do. You give yourself over is the right word. I wrote down a couple quotes, or a few quotes that really appealed to me, and one of them was about how important love is to, one's being able to write, to that acceptance that you're talking about, and also passion. Victor Hugo talked about passion. I think he was the one who talked about love. He was the influence on my teacher, poet Richard Hugo. He talked about passion. He said, we have an interval, and then our place knows us no more. Our one chance lies in expanding that interval. Great passions may give us this quickened sense of life. Only be sure it is passion, that it does yield you this fruit of a quickened, I love this, multiplied consciousness. And I sense that in your first book, Erin. I mean, there's a lot of energy packed into that book for you to draw upon, even now, as you continue to write. I mean, it's a real treasure trove.
Thank you. And I mean, I think it's amazing, because I thought I was going to be done writing poems about disability. I thought, okay, now I've written that book and it's done. Bye. And it's not done.
I'm so glad you said that, because our lives, we don't choose our lives choose us, I think. And something like that, or something like the suicide of my father, for example, when I was an adolescent, basically a 20-year-old who had just eloped. Why? Because he was sick, and I'd just gotten back from Australia. What was I going to do? I was going to elope. I got to do something. So you draw on that. It's a crack in the veneer of the artificial consciousness in a way, and it continues to be cleansed and make sacrifice, which allows the muse to come in and give us that energy. I had kind of hoped, oh gee, I'll grow out of this, And I went to a conference in Switzerland as a Jungian with Dr. Lionel Corbett at Eranos, where the house where Jung taught a lot of his things. And Corbett was telling us about meaning, and he said, suffering doesn't mean a lot in general, or just kind of the idea of it. But he said it matters to one person, because that person says, why me? Mm-hmm. Why am I feeling this? And that to me opened that door. I don't know.
Very cool.
It is hard work to write.
It is.
Yeah. You probably remember Philip Levine reading that poem about his cat climbing across his page and causing his lines to be so very short, and consequently he got a lot of money from the New Yorker when they published his poem because they pay by the line. Did you ever?
I never did. That's funny.
I can't remember the title, but I just thought it was delightful because that shows again just how ordinary we really are. And, you know, if your cat creates your short lines and you can admit that, yay, you know,
Yeah.
that's organic, I'd say. That's organic. Yeah. Oh, Sharon also talked about love. She said, I think to a poet is like a community of birds birds singing to each other. Love is one of the songs we are singing to one another. Isn't that cool?
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a very feminine way of talking about that energy rather than calling it suffering and sacrifice, which is a male heroic myth, really.
Yeah. Sharon Olds, she's very interesting to me, and I could definitely see her in some of your work, I feel like. So that's interesting.
Why is she interesting to you?
She's interesting to me because she says things and that other people just don't say. In her work, she talks about things that other people just wouldn't talk about. And she's very open and just very real. I appreciate that about her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear Adrienne Rich's comment where she said, in a world where language and naming are power, silence is oppression, even violence? And I think that reminds me of Sharon Olds' work, that she had experienced that oppression of silence to the point of violence to herself. And so when she came out with it, she was just so free.
Yeah.
She just said whatever, you know, no subject was beneath her, or she was operating no longer from fear, I guess, but rather from what she calls love. I don't know what love means, but I'm glad you're writing those poems because everybody wants to find out more about it. It's the best subject, you know.
Yeah.
One
of the oldest subjects, yeah.
Well, and it's something that everyone has experience with, and everyone is, you know, often trying to find something to help them make sense of their experience. So I think, yeah, I think it's a very powerful subject. I'm excited to read your book, Erin.
Oh, thank you.
Me too. And the fact that you have this awareness, Erin, that you are writing about the body as it has been defined culturally as other, that came out of feminism. And here you are, a poet, digesting that in a real way as a woman and making poems out of that. And that's what's going to change women about our bodies. It's not the theory. Theory comes over here, and we had all that for a long time. It didn't help at all. You know, it's what you're doing. See, but where you are along in the cultural flow or river is a wonderful place to be, because you're going to be able to do that for a number of those ideas.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah.
This is so wonderful to be able to talk to each other, even though we're doing it virtually.
I know.
This is great. Yeah, it's really great.
I was going to ask you, so like all of your books they're very distinct. Each one is very distinct, like it has a subject or a place where it lives. How do you go from writing about one thing into writing about another? Like how do you manage that flow? Because you can't, it feels like for me, like I have to start over at the beginning every time.
No, I think it's absolutely right, because your feeling is right, and that's the feeling of death or loss. And it's also related to grief and change. And that's what it is. It's not a comfortable feeling. I believe once we get into that terrible place, that's why we write again, or we probably stop.
Yeah.
You know, because it's a lot of work to write, you know. You have to really, it takes a lot of you to write poems, especially, you know. It's very much of your, you know, flesh and blood in those poems, and heart and soul, you know. So that's what I would say, is there's no escape from that. And you write desperately to get out of it. And somehow it takes you to another place. But you've got to write a lot of bad stuff. In other stuff that you don't, not bad, but stuff that you don't work on too heavily, you know. And that's been a lesson for me that I still have to learn, because I spent so much time working on different things, trying to make them better, and you know, and that just keeps you in the rabbit hole forever.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm doing right now is I'm creating a life list of memories, earliest memories up through my adolescence, up to the point of the loss of my father. And what I'm finding is that there are all these memories coming back that I never dreamed I would ever, that I didn't even know I had, that have energy in them. So I'm not making poems out of them. I'm simply making a list and then taking each thing and doing free writing for like 45 minutes on it to see what comes forward. And the words almost pull the rest of the stuff out of you. You know, once you get those words going on your side, they will pull out like a rope, stuff that you don't even know is in there. So that's one thing I'm trying to do because I need more energy. I think there's a lot of energy still locked up that could help me now. I don't know. What do you do? How do you get out of that?
Well, right now I'm using part of my money from the fellowship to work with a mentor, a poet in Minneapolis, and she's helping me coming up with these great exercises about like looking at your poems and writing a new poem from each line in an old poem, and just fabulous things like that are just so helpful and helping me to get more energy around writing.
That's a great thing to do with that.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Facebook. Someone has asked whether you find writing poetry exhausting and how you deal with that, or if you do.
I would say it can be, definitely. It's a lot of emotional work to write a poem. Especially if you're being honest and you're really going to the heart of the matter, it is exhausting. But you do it because in the end you get something beautiful out of it and it feels so good. You just have to keep doing it.
And don't you think there's a point too where once you've got that poem in the little corral or whatever, there's a great jubilation. I mean, because
yes.
you know you have it. And then if once you get into that area, it can be quite wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just letting it go again. You know, the wild horse out running around when you aren't sure it's ready. That's hard, but
yeah.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Mm-hmm. Nikki Giovanni said, writers don't write from experience, they write from empathy. I love that.
That is nice.
Yeah, it sets women, I mean, she's a woman, a Black woman speaking, and women always were being criticized for writing about themselves. Oh, it's all about you, and we're so tired of your story, and, why don't you get a bigger subject, So I just loved how she opened that door of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
Which is a conduit. It's a medium.
Yeah.
It's not owned by anyone. It's a universal medium, which I think is marvelous. Wakes it up, wakes up the energy. I would like to read you something. I found, you'll think this is really funny. I found some old student evaluations in a box. And one of them I took out in 1996, and I won't tell you who wrote it. But this is great insight from someone who took one of my classes. It was the 419 class, Erin, which is the advanced one. So I found my voice in, this is a man too. I found my voice in poetry, exclamation point. I no longer need to write poems in several styles attempting to experiment. Now that my voice has emerged, it is easier for me to write poems. I no longer have to use my intellect. Yay! I can use my ears to write. I just love this. The pen moves more freely on the paper. And then he wrote, I have learned that a poet is a voice for one person or millions of persons. The poet is an extremely strong influence in society because he or she has the power to write and ask, what if? What if? Poems happen because they need to. Important events, emotional or spiritual, all of these contribute to the poem, but are not exclusive to the poem. I just found that to be so wise.
That is a great evaluation.
Yeah, it's a self-evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
It's just great, yeah. It isn't the course, it's what happened for that person.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And, we talk about finding our voices, and I would like to say something on behalf of women too, because we're often accused of, again, speaking in our personal voice and all that stuff. I think that there is a universal consciousness, through which all perception comes and all voices come. And it's an enormity, it's transpersonal. And so every time an artist steps up, they're going to take a piece of that and make it available to others, a way in to that large transpersonal reality, which is overwhelming for people. And so we're doing, it's a spiritual activity, I think, in a way, in terms of spirit, not religion,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about who are you reading right now that you are finding really exciting?
I knew you'd ask me that. Because you are such a good student. And I was prepared for it. Actually, I'm only reading people I went to in the MFA program with right now.
Oh.
Yeah, and many of them have published more books than I have, and I consider them, I admire them because they're different than me. So that's what I'm doing right now. And so Robert Wrigley, Patricia Clark, Candace Black, Lex Runciman, Richard Robbins, Paul Zarzyski, trying to get as many women in there too as I can, because women were really cast away for a long time. I mean, the thing about Meridel Lasser, I'll never forget when she told us at this conference about being interviewed by a famous critic from the East along with Robert Bly, and the critic ignored her. Every time she tried to speak, Robert would speak, and the critic would just turn to Robert and he would say everything. And she wanted us to realize that was almost an unconscious pattern, And so I think that we're always up against that in a way, and it's really a pleasure to be in this kind of forum with another woman who's a poet. You're not a woman poet, you're among the best poets. You're a poet, It's so nice to not have to be a woman poet,
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks to Meridel. Yeah, thanks to Meridel Lasser.
I have another question from Facebook. They want to know if either of you are going to be teaching a workshop or a course sometime soon, somewhere, maybe online.
I'm going to teach one in the spring through the Headwater School. I usually do one or two of those.
Yeah.
Right now I'm resting, having just retired, and I'm surrounded by boxes that I have to sort through and throw most of it away. So it's overwhelming. Thank you.
I don't have any classes right now that I have set up, but I'm very open to doing that. So if anybody has any interest, they can contact me and we can work something out, because it would be fun to do a class.
How would they contact you? Through your website?
Yeah, they can contact me through my website or my email, which is on the website. So, yeah.
And this is also a good moment to remind our viewers that we have both Erin and Carol Ann's contact information, websites, any which way that you can contact them is on our ReZume Arts page as well. If you go to art2arts.org, there'll be a ReZume Arts button, and you can absolutely connect with them if you happen to not be able to write. But that's also a really great question. So even if you don't have things coming up, do you keep a list so that you can kind of gather people's interest and they can just email you? Is that right for both of you?
Yeah.
That's a great way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. My kitty said she wanted to be part of this too. So there's too many cats going on and I'm not there.
That's wonderful. What's her name?
Twig.
My cat is Tassadar.
Oh, nice.
Male cat. One other thing that's fun to do is get a manuscript from somebody. Like this is from Carl Sandburg. And I visited his house in Flat Rock, North Carolina. And it's he's such an ordinary brown shoe kind of guy, and his wife raised goats, and they just lived so normally and had all these books. But it's fun to read something in their own handwriting, and realize that, they're just like people just like us, living and trying to find time to write. And so.
Yeah. I like, I read things about Sylvia Plath before, and they'll have like examples of her having written poems like on the back of stationery from the college where she taught. And I don't know, I just love little things like that. Little details are so interesting.
Oh, I wanted to show you the books that I write in because you're going to find this very funny. And it's thanks for that intro. So I keep getting these wonderful books. I mean, I buy them from India and people give them to me. This is a pretty normal one. Sometimes a leather book, you know. And I'll tell you what, I can never finish those books. They're too intimidating. And so I end up going to some pad of paper, you know, that I can just rip off and stack up on the floor. And so don't be afraid of that. Like if those books come to you, they're lovely, buy them, write stuff in them, maybe quotes or whatever. And don't worry if you don't finish them, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious. I must have at least 15 of them. Many of them gifts, many I bought myself. Never could write in them. I was too intimidated.
So Erin, I'm curious, you know, what are you reading right now that's really inspiring you?
I'm really trying to focus on women writers too right now. So I'm reading this wonderful poet. Her name is Tracy Brimhall. She just writes beautiful sort of like dreamlike poems. And the book that I'm reading right now is, she wrote it after a friend of hers was murdered. And so some of these poems are very dark and but it's wonderful. It's dreamlike. I adore it. And so I've been reading that the last few days, and I'm just really enjoying it. And I also like to read like a fiction book at the same time. So I am reading a fiction book. It's a young adult novel, but it's so good.
So you're letting yourself relax, you know.
Yeah.
The girl in you relax. I remember reading that you're interested in magical realism now and that it's helping you lift up some of your experiences to this other level. Well, I have to share this thing that Gabriel Garcia Marquez said about that. He was asked whether he was on drugs, you know, because of his books. And he responded to that and he said, let's see, I wrote this down because I wrote it down because I was thinking I wanted to share it with you. He said, well, everything begins with the first paragraph. He was very humble, you know, if that's all it is. And then he said, drugs, he goes, to be a writer, you have to be absolutely lucid and in good health. I just love that. You know, so yeah, the trips that poets take usually alone, we have to be alone on our journey to do anything. You know, you can't prove that you're not on drugs, but that's the first thing they ask you is something like that, you know, because altered consciousness in poetry where time becomes relative and, you know, chronological reality disappears and simultaneity enters and all these things and phantasms and dreams. It really does unsettle people.
Yes. Yeah, I sometimes will bring my poems, my more recent magical realism poems to my writing group. And I get a lot of, well, that can't happen. But I'm like, but it can in the world of the poem. That's what you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Ursula Le Guin's work?
No, I haven't.
I think you might like her because she talks about freedom and that's what you're doing. She says, as a writer, you are free. In fact, she said, there's no more free person probably in the world than a writer. Your freedom is what you have bought with your solitude, your loneliness. And she was science fiction, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's where I've heard it.
Yeah.
We do have another question from Facebook. A Facebook viewer asks, so do you two write about your own experiences as a method of affecting those around you? Or as we do in songwriting, do you try and share more universal experiences in an interesting way so more people can connect with it? It sounds like a dramatically different world from songwriting. Sounds like there is more freedom from the demands of commercialism. You guys want to respond to that?
Go ahead, Erin.
What I would say about that is, for me personally, I write about my own experiences, but I find that the more detailed and more specific I am in my own experiences, the more that other people can relate to it and be like, oh yeah, I felt that same way. I know what you're talking about. So it's just another way into the same thing of a, you know, you just, you're helping people to connect with you by giving them as much detail and as much energy as possible.
And again, you know, Anne Sexton talked about that. She was criticized for that. And she read all her poems over the telephone to Maxine Kumin. That's how she survived. And she said, I write very personal poems, but I hope that they will become the central theme to someone else's private life.
That's nice.
Well, speaking of poems, we don't want to run out of time before we get a chance to hear some of yours. Erin, do you want to start with maybe a poem that you have?
Sure. This is my book, Disability Isn't Sexy. And I'll read a poem from that. A lot of my poems, the title just bleeds into the poem. So I'll just start there. You could easily pick me out of a police lineup, but you won't, will you? To identify me as the woman who digs through the trash set out in the alley would mean I am the same woman brought home from the bar last night. It means at some point you overlooked my left leg, dented and scarred, the lopsided hips onto which was stitched a map of rivers and tributaries of another planet. The fat gathered at my stomach, awaiting further instructions. No one saw me limping from the car to your front door, my bulky body lurching left with each step. You wouldn't have needed to explain my presence to anyone, but I fled your bed at dawn. What we had did not sate me. I woke the neighbors as I foraged for love in your garbage can, frantically digging, tipping it over like a raccoon scurrying away as back porch lights switched on, making do with whatever bits I managed to snatch.
That's beautiful. And it's, you know, it's such a beautiful example of what poets do with archetypes, because they work, you know, the singer works with an archetype differently because it has a melody and can touch the soul that way. And the way this attention to detail, I thought of Maya Angelou, phenomenally a woman, a phenomenal woman, you know, that it's exemplified in your poem.
Oh,
You know, yeah, with the map on your own body of, you know, the universal, and not being seen, you know, not being seen. I love that. Do you want to read another one first?
Sure, I could read another one.
In your voice.
This is a newer one. It is when my beloved brushes away the flakes of dry skin I leave behind on his fully moisturized lips, I finally reveal to him the white ceramic heart-shaped box I keep in the bathroom drawer of the gold-flecked bathroom vanity. I tell him how I spend 15 minutes every day exfoliating my lips with a soft toothbrush, a tissue laid out before me like a placemat to catch DNA-laden slivers of skin from my mouth to collect in the felt-bottomed container. I tell him how I use this stash to line his briefcase and the underside of his paisley tie, sprinkle myself into each of his days. I'm afraid this will frighten him, that all day he will check his clothes for traces of me, itch at the thought of my lingering, even during an important budget meeting, like tenacious lice on the family dog. I beg him to forgive me, to understand that my love for him has grown so unwieldy, I must break it apart, find somewhere else to keep it other than my heart.
Oh, that's marvelous. That's beautiful. Is that one of the love poems?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. I love it. Yeah. Well, I don't have anything quite like that, but I actually returned to a time when I was 18 with the guy that I ended up eloping with. And it was, you know, it was based on a real experience. And then I realized it just kind of slipped more into the universal. So, What the River Murmured. Lying together in the dark on the old army blanket, wrapped with each other's body, we were 18 and beautiful. The river was our witness. How could we know what the stars meant? By the time I knew, you were dead beyond our future. The river was still the river. Silent and listening, we had already begun to die, the river moving on without us. It's that ephemeral quality of whatever that love is, you know. I mean, you can't, the reason we write about love is it's impossible.
Yeah.
So we can't really be indicted for anything because, you know, it's impossible to begin with. So, yeah.
That's lovely. Do you have another one to read?
Well, this one is much, well, I guess I could stay on that same subject. It's called apnea. We climb the heights of mortality every day, angelic idiots. Meanwhile, the brain, starving for air, blinks on, then off. The fountain in its plastic box is electric, infallible, resuscitates doubt. Desperate, we turn ourselves into the poetry police, letting them wire us to machines. Through tiny aperture, they watch us dream, kick our legs and toss on the invisible sheets of time. It is not easy to die. We wake ourselves 60 times an hour. It practically kills us. It's very, very cynical, kind of bitter, you know, but yeah, about that same subject. But
Wow, that's really beautiful, both
That
of
is
you.
beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing. One thing we want to make sure that people know about, just again as a reminder, if you just popped in, we have two local artists, Erin, Lynn Marsh, and Carol Ann Russell. You can find out information on how to connect. And Erin, I'll get back in touch with you about the blogs so that I can make sure that it's up on the website.
Okay.
And if you are interested, both of them are workshop leaders, facilitators, you know, facilitators of the poetry, of the world of poetry. And if you want to connect, just send them an email and they will add you to the list of any upcoming learning opportunities. I know I'm going to be signing up for that, so I'm pretty excited. And I just wanted to make sure, are there any places that people can buy your, so Erin, one of the things you mentioned is that people can buy your book directly from you with a signed copy?
Mm-hmm.
And they can just email you about that, right?
They can, yep.
Okay. And then Carol Ann, do you have any books available in the area that people should know about?
there are some at Harmony Co-op and the Headwater School. And then I have copies of Silver Dollar. I discovered another box from the publisher that was unopened. Otherwise, all my other books are out of print. So the Silver Dollar just keeps on reproducing, I guess.
That's great.
The corners.
Yeah. I'm really curious, just one last thing, you know, that maybe would you care to tell us a little bit more about your archetypal pattern analyst, like you know, if that's woven into the poetry, if that's woven into your workshops? I think that that's something that people might be interested in learning more about.
Sure. I went to it later, you know, in the last 10 or 12 years after just tiring of just focusing on literature and poetry. And I found myself among the strange. I was the only poet there. The rest of them were, you know, psychologists, psychoanalysts, and all of that. No, I teach workshops that work with archetypes. And I realized for my thesis for that degree, that certification as an archetypal pattern analyst, I used my own poetry workshop as the experiment. And I was doing a lot of things right, you know, so that helped me refine, you know, the energy space that was going on in there, and what I did that was different than like a psychoanalyst or a Jungian psychoanalyst. And it really came together when I had a graduate student take my classes, who is she was a Freudian psychoanalyst, and she also just affirmed that at one point. She said, you know, we do the same thing, but we do it very differently. And so she would go from group to group and provide something else. So I can't say I use it directly in my poetry, but it has really enriched my understanding of the process and, you know, how it all, another way to understand that artistry of the mystery of who we are. I guess that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Endlessly fascinating, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we have just about 5 minutes left. You know, we'd love to have you say, and you know, I mean, if there's anything else that you would like to bring up that we haven't talked about, or any questions you want to ask each other, would be lovely too.
I have just this little poem by Carl Sandburg, and it has the image of the cat in it. It seems to want to be heard. It's called Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over city and harbor on silent haunches and then moves on.
I like that poem.
I love that poem too.
You know that poem, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
our cat can be our subject. Our cat can be our teacher.
that's right. I thought I would read a poem, if I can find it here. It's when we were talking about Sharon Olds, it reminded me of this poem. I was listening to a podcast and she was on it, and one of the things she said was to be kind when you're alone with yourself. And I just thought that was so wonderful. So I wrote this poem. Be nice to yourself when you're alone. It is suggested you begin by kissing your own wrist. You will taste your perfume the way a lover does when kissing behind an ear. Run your tongue across your lips over and over. Memorize the briny flavor of skin mixed with patchouli. Let your taste buds conjure an Arctic ocean where you are the only shipwreck lining the seabed, covered lovingly in protective sand and silt for the rest of your days.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm gonna take that to heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And thank you again so much for making space to be here today. It's been a real pleasure to hear you, to hear about your process, to hear about your current work, to learn about ways that people can learn with you and learn from you, because you gave us so much substance in terms of your writing and what inspires you and how you navigate the writing inspiration. I also want to just let anybody who's out there viewing remind you that we will host another ReZume Arts. Our next one is October 28th. We're going to have 2 visual artists, Katie Lou Sandberg and Jillian Bedford. And we hope you can join us once again. Thank you on behalf of Region 2, and we look forward to being in touch again.
Thank you,
Yes,
Kath.
we and our board of directors are so proud to have you as fellows in our fellowship program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Real honor.
Yes,
And I look forward to getting together with you again, Erin. We have to figure out something. So.
we do.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye.
Bye.